really enjoyed that very freewheeling analysis that you and Sasky have had, and I think it'll be a very exciting day tomorrow. So Charita and Sasky, thank you very much from Abhishek, Shawan and me. And we'll come back to you. I think you'll be talking to your reporters in some time. Viewers, we must define the larger issues tonight. I'll avoid the news package on this because it's really set in a way. But I'd like to see our guests out there in the studios, please. And I am told that I have. So the way we'll do it tonight, can I have them on air, please, Sean? So we have Sushant and Abhijit Chawda and Dr. Swasti Rao of the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, IDSA, in Delhi, representing the Indian point of view, and Sushant and Abhijit, both from geopolitical and international affairs perspective, and will give us an India view on it. We will have Russian guests tonight. We have President of IDC Amicability, Dr. Sergey Dovarianov. Dr. Sergey will be joining us. Tatiana Kokareva, senior journalist, joining us from Moscow for the Russian perspective. And Abhishek, it's very important, Shawan, to put an American perspective to it. Obviously. Because if there's one capital that's looking at this, right now it's Washington. So we have Glenn Carl, former U.S. intelligence officer from Washington. We have Adel Nazarian, senior fellow of the Gold Institute of International Strategy from Washington, and also from Hong Kong, Andrew K.P. Leung for a China perspective. So we have different perspectives tonight. Right, Sushant, let's open this up with you. Who's going to be most nervous at what's going on in Moscow?
Arnab, I don't think there'll be any nervousness. I think there will be some unhappiness. There will be unhappiness in the West, partly because despite all their efforts, India is not willing to let go of this relationship, which India finds a very useful relationship, a mutually beneficial relationship, and feels that, to try and box India into a particular corner. Look, it's one thing for a very small country with a limited footprint to be boxed into a corner and into a particular with a particular side. You can't box a country like India into that kind of a slot. So I think India will want to keep her options open. India will want to keep her, it's called strategic autonomy. I don't exactly like that phrase, but we, for want of a better word, we want to keep our strategic autonomy in place. We want to interact with various players because we need many of these, and these are mutually beneficial relationships. So I think there will be some amount of unhappiness, at least in the West. The Chinese will be looking at this relationship very carefully, but I think the Chinese are also convinced that to a great extent the Russians are going to be also in their corner. So I don't think they'll be overtly worried. Most of the other countries really don't matter. It's the West and China and India trying to, forge a path for herself between these blocks and trying to maximize our own benefit. We are not going to take sides unnecessarily. We don't want to diss one for the other. We are not going to do anything like that. But we want to, keep a mutually beneficial relationship with whoever we can. And that's the same principle, incidentally, which we've learned from the West, because the West, when it suits the West, principles don't matter.
Right,
when they invade countries, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's perfectly valid. It's for the cause of democracy that they destroy countries. It's to remove dictators that they've destroyed countries like Libya, like Syria, many other countries, Iraq, for example. And look what they've left in its wake. And yet, when there is another country which, for its own reasons, and I don't agree with what the Russians have done in Ukraine, I would even go to the extent of condemning it because I'm an individual. I have the luxury of doing it. But even then, the Russians have their own perspective. And frankly, it's not my war. And there is no reason for me to, try and take sides in a particular war. Both are my friends. I'd like them to get off the war plane.
Sushant. Sushant, Tatiana would want to get in, but before that, I want to get the West perspective. Let's go to Glenn. And Glenn, you think though Sushant denies that, but you think the Americans would be worried that Prime Minister Modi has made Russia his first port of call after taking over as Prime Minister in a third term?
Well, from the U.S. perspective and from the West perspective, of course, it's not a really welcome development. It's not a surprising one, really. All of the talk of the previous commentators and pundits in general about friendship and so on, it really is a lot of hot air. Countries pursue their national interests, and India has national interests, and it wants to be to develop itself and to have cheaper, pay less for oil than more. All countries would do that, and it is large enough and strong enough to be able to do so without incurring particular costs or pressures. It's too big to pressure. It is a big boy now. So it's not a surprise. From the Western perspective, it's not a good development, but from Russia's, it's a great one.
It does tell you, I'd like Tatiana to come in. It does tell you, Glenn, that America should stop believing that it can influence any country's decision. America cannot influence the decision of any company, any country. And maybe you overestimate it. It's not to do with just oil. It is beyond oil. Russian companies have been investing in India. Indian companies have been investing billions in Russia. Our trade increase is not a temporary phenomenon. Our economic relations carried on before, during, and after the Cold War. It is America's estimates which have gone wrong. Tatiana, please, how do you view this and the response that is coming in from a quote-unquote jealous West?